Hello, and welcome to Madmen's Knowledge, a podcast where we answer questions no one is asking and argue about things no one cares about in order to grant you insight. Insight as to what? We don't know, but here we are. We're your hosts, the Madmen in question, Hayne and Griffin, and today's topic of discussion is, are androids ever actually alive, and could you murder them? And to start us off, I think that what we want to do is define what does it mean to be alive? Very existential, philosophical question
Oh,
here.
oh, good. Yeah. So we're gonna start out today very simply by
Yeah.
defining life. Um.
Yeah.
So, I do think that life here has to go beyond sentience. Because there is a difference. Because sentience is merely you are responsive, or conscious of your own existence.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, because at this stage, at the point where we would have androids that could, well, actually, first of all, I probably jumped the gun a little bit here, but I think android is what we're talking about is if you're familiar with like synths from the Fallout series, they're just robots that have like human personalities like embedded into them. At the point where we can create technology like that, we would have computers that are smart enough to recognize their own existence, thus being sentient. And I would say that we have some computers that are sentient in that sense, but it'd be
I'd
like
agree.
low-level sentience. Anyway,
It's worth noting also that Warforged and from the Dungeons and Dragons universe and um I don't know what else, but anything that involves actually placing the consciousness. Oh, Exos
so yeah, Destiny.
from Destiny. Anything that involves placing the consciousness of a human being uh into a synthetic form is definitely not fair game for this because humans are sentient. Ergo, if you put one in a machine, it's still a sentient being or a
Yeah,
still
and
a living being.
yeah, and the other thing is that what complicates like the argument of like are exos alive is that exos are actually built to have um living qualities, like they have to eat and drink despite the fact that they're robots. Um and we're not going to go into the lore on that, but that's just like a thing that complicates the issue further. So we're just not going to talk about that. We're talking about like robots where like you build them and they have like it's like the equivalent of like creating a child. It's just that instead of it being a biological child, it is a robot baby.
Yes.
So I would say an android, or so to be alive in this sense, I think you need to have sentience, and I think you need to have like an ability to grow or change over time, like physically, because I don't because like I'm trying to justify this, but I can't really think about it. Like when you're living, just as like a natural process of it is your body grows and changes over time as like you age. I don't think that aging necessarily indicates that you're alive, since we have multiple animals that live for a very long time, and I'm pretty sure there's like a certain breed of jellyfish that like doesn't age, that's like immortal in that sense. Um anyway, like evolution basically. I think that you need to be able to evolve.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, because the thing, and we can't really use the scientific definition of life, where it's like you have to have cells and things like that,
It
because
is difficult because we're defining things based on biological standards,
criteria. Yeah.
but these are not biological beings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So. my thought is that like an example of an android would be I think a good example of an android would be like Ultron from the Marvel universe.
I
Like
agree.
that's an
I agree.
android because and I think that that's a living android in the sense that he has sentience and he intentionally makes an effort to modify himself to better suit his environment and to complete his goals, which I think is similar to how a human like acts or like a living thing acts, where they do whatever is in their ability to accomplish their goals.
Hmm.
I wouldn't say that Vision's a good example though, because I think he's also partially human, which muddles the water a bit.
Um, in what way?
In the MCU, it says that it's like they combine human cells from the regeneration cradle or whatever it's called, with Ultron's technology, which is how they make the body of Vision.
See, but I would argue that he is, in fact, the prime example of an android.
But the thing is that I feel like that's kind of getting more into the territory of cyborg because there's a biological aspect to it. Like he's not 100% inorganic.
I don't know actually exactly how the regeneration cradle works, but I know that it's not actual human cells, which is where I'm going with that.
Okay.
Is that it is synthetic skin.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I don't know if you could count. I still feel like that's a synthetic. Like, his body is fully synthetic. It is manufactured.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay,
and of
so
course, there's an argument there to be made that it's human, but it is manufactured, which makes it
okay, so
synthetic.
here's a question then, I guess. Sorry to cut you off. So like lab-grown meats, um, that's like that's like biotic cells that we are manufacturing synthetically. Um, like do we count that? Like do we count those cells as being like organic or not in terms of like are they or sorry biotic? You know what I mean?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like because if we consider those to be inorganic or abiotic, um, then that would definitely indicate that that Vision would be a completely abiotic or biotic being. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm using these words wrong, which is probably going to piss somebody off, but yeah.
Biotic and abiotic. I mean, technically not. The difficulty is again these are biological terms. Where anything abiotic, metal is abiotic.
Yeah.
And chemicals are abiotic.
Yeah.
But theoretically, vision is some combination of metal and chemicals that results in realistic human-like cells.
Yeah.
The other thing to think about is that he can be fully repaired. Like, he does not heal.
Mm.
Vision does not heal like a normal human does. Um, which, again, muddles the waters and makes things complicated because part of the conditions for something to be biotic are that it has to undergo homeostasis. And
Yeah.
there is an argument to be made that um, robots and, by extension, androids undergo a form of homeostasis in that they are, they're presumably they are cooling and regulating their systems, um, because of course they have to. Any independently operated thing, like theoretically, my computer right now is undergoing a form of homeostasis.
Yeah.
But the difficulty is that he he doesn't heal. Like he doesn't, which is funny because he's made out of organic material.
Yeah.
But he cannot. He can't taste. I know that, and I don't think he has to eat.
Yeah.
Um, but he can, because again, we see him eat in WandaVision.
Yeah. Well,
Um, yeah, but
well, there
anyway,
is there's a question on that though. Is that like he can eat as we've said, but like in that show, he's like there's a lot of tomfuckery with reality in that show.
oh, of
So I don't
course,
know.
it makes it very
So
difficult to trust anything that we see happen.
happens there. Yeah. Anyway, no, the other thing though is trying to stray away from that one specific example so that we have a little bit wider of a base. I don't know enough about the Fallout universe to know like if synths undergo homeostasis in the same way or if they have to eat or drink or like if they get damaged, do they repair themselves or do they have to like find somebody to fix them? Um so but assuming that they do, assuming that like they are able to heal themselves. Let's.
Hayne?
Why have I made such a complicated thought?
Oh, I don't know. I was like,
I I don't know. Like, I guess does this really matter? Is this all just semantics?
um, not really, but it is definitely semantics. But again, that's the point of the show.
Yeah.
So let's. I think we've plumbed some depths here, and started well. Let's move on to the secondary part of this question, which is, uh, can androids be murdered, regardless of whether or not they're alive? Could they be murdered?
Yeah.
My argument is again no. I don't believe that androids are alive. Um, and by extension of that, I don't think that you could murder them just given the fact of how easy they are to bring back.
Yeah.
Theoretically,
Okay.
you could just plug in. Again, it's probably not the greatest example, but my PC. If my PC gets hit by a truck, theoretically,
Yeah.
I can take every component and piece of data. If that's still recoverable from the wreck, then or then it is possible to bring it back. So I don't think it counts as murder.
Well, then we have a ship of Theseus type shit.
Oh yes,
Um.
absolutely. And again with like memory
Mhm.
and if I clone you and then kill you, have I murdered Hayne Henderson?
Who knows? Okay. But so my argument is that you can murder them because the key part to preserving your PC's life is all of the data on it. So if I were to like take the memory and if I were to take like the memory and all the data on your computer and I were to wipe it and then put it back, like the actual physical body would be there, but none of the information would be. And thus I think that that would be equivalent to murdering an android because you have deleted their personality and their character has ceased to exist from this plane.
Ah, well, here's the counter to that is if I hit you hard enough on the head, or if I undergo some process, maybe by microwaves or something, and I figure out a way to wipe your synapses clean so that you don't remember anything. You're not dead. You haven't been murdered. Your physical form still exists, regardless of your mental state. So you are still alive. And I would argue that the same applies with androids. And because they are infinitely reproducible, because you can, theoretically, if you've got them saved anywhere, like Jarvis
Yeah.
in the universe, if you have a backup of Jarvis and Vision dies, you can make another Vision. um, that is identical. And so in that way, like, you can never really murder an android so long as they are able to be reproduced.
Okay, but still, like, if even if you can reproduce them, like if I were so, let's say theoretically, I'm walking on the street and there's an android in front of me, and I pop a cap in his ass, and then I go and delete his like backup save off of the cloud. You know, his physical body has ceased, and um the ability to recover has also been removed. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like that would count as murder. And I I realize that the core of this argument is not, is it actually alive to be killed? It's where is what constitutes as murder? Is it destruction of a character, or is it destruction of the body?
Both.
So
The reason
so
that
to
murder
murder some,
exists is because in the example you just defined, that could be murder, perhaps. But again, because it's an android, that's where we get into the argument. At that point, if you do that to an android, and according to law, androids are alive, then that's murder.
yeah.
Um, but until that point, as long as either the body or consciousness still exists, you have not killed, or you have not. I'm trying to think of a biological synthetic neutral term for, you have ended its existence.
Yeah.
Terminated is a good word for it. Um,
Hmm.
and I would argue that at that point you have to define it as something different and not murder. Because the act of murder for humans is the death of the physical form. But the only reason that that is considered murder is because the the consciousness dies with the physical form.
Yeah.
With androids, like if I come up to you, and again I first undergo the process of removing your consciousness and removing everything that makes you you, so that you are just a generic 19-year-old human, then I haven't murdered you. But regardless of whether or not I've done that, if I stab you and you die, that's murder. Does that make sense? So the
Yeah,
destruction
that
of the
makes
physical
sense.
form is always necessary for humans.
Yes.
I think it's the opposite for androids.
Interesting.
Because
Okay.
for androids, if you destroy the consciousness, then all you're left with is a hunk of metal.
Yeah.
Like, and you can reproduce a consciousness and put a different one in there, but then that is, I would argue, a fundamentally different android.
Okay. Okay. So let's consider this. Let's consider it like this. So let's say we have androids, and their minds are backed up on a cloud, and I go up and I kill one. Like, I just destroy the physical body, just break it, throw it in front of a truck. I don't know. And then they just take the consciousness, immediately upload it into a new frame, and then it just goes on about its day. You know, that's not murder anymore. It'd certainly be like battery.
I'd agree.
Um,
I agree. It's destruction of property. You get charged with destruction of property, and the android continues living.
yeah. Well, so here's a question, I guess. Whose property would I be destroying? The android itself? Like,
Whoever owns the
is the
android. I'm perceiving that there is no point in the future
where
where
androids have rights,
androids have, uh, they could have rights. Um,
but
because
they're not gonna be like independent
they're
citizens.
not going to be independent citizens. And there's, of course, there's going to be edge cases, um, I'll talk about that later. But like the tree that owns itself.
Yeah.
Of course, there's gonna be stuff like that where it's like, hey, this thing has been around for a really frickin' long time, and there's no one like who created it is actually left. So like at that point, you would be like, hey, maybe this thing is independent, because it truly is. But so I do want to, because while thinking about the last thing I said, which is that death of consciousness is murdering an android and death of the body is murdering a human. Um, I actually think that murder is the death of the consciousness for both.
Okay. Yeah.
I just think that the only way that you can fully kill a human's consciousness is by killing their body.
Yeah.
Which I think is where we draw the distinction. Because if there was a way that you could back up a human consciousness somewhere and then put it back into the same body,
Like clone them.
maybe
Like
not clone them, but I'm saying, in this world where there exists a way for someone to remove the human consciousness from the body in a similar way that you can do with an android,
Mhm.
then you could put, like, if that happens to you, if you get your hard drive pulled and then you have the husk, but I have a backup of you and I plug you into the husk, I think you're still alive, right? You're still alive in your unaltered state.
Yes.
So in that way, androids are an example of how, if we could do that, then murder would be the death of the consciousness, and stabbing someone would then become property destruction, or destruction of property.
Interesting. I do like that answer. I'm a fan of that. So, let's say Borderlands, how they have the, like, I don't remember what it's called, but like the respawn system.
Yes, the respawn
It's
system.
it's an in-universe like system where when you die, they like take your body and they rebuild it basically, so you're still alive. So you don't actually die when you die.
Uh-huh.
So, say we have that system in place, for humans. You know, how does that like you we've established now that the consciousness is remaining, and that even though your physical body, originally dies, you're rebuilt, and your consciousness is still alive. You're still going about your life. You haven't been murdered. What becomes then? That's property damage. Yeah.
Uh, mm. Uh,
Because you have actually killed this person. It's just it's not a permanent state.
I think it depends. And I think this is where we get into legislation and discussing who has rights and what those rights are in the future. Because from a certain point of view, yes, that is only property destruction. But when you consider that for humans, you stabbing someone, okay, sorry. There needs to be more background for this. If we assume, if that system exists, and everyone is linked up to it on Earth, so no one on Earth can die anymore, I think that then, if you stab someone, it's property damage. I think that if we live in any system where there are still a good amount of people not connected to it, stabbing someone still constitutes murder, because it is with the intent to end the existence of that person.
Yes.
And so I think that is where you hit the difference between murder and the destruction of property in terms of like legislation and how that works when the form is a renewable resource. Which is weird to say. Here's an interesting discussion. Would you do that? Would
Like,
you
would I
sign up
link
for
my
that
body?
service?
Well, I don't know. That once again my mind goes out to the ship of Theseus, where it's like, are you really? Because it's like my understanding is similar to like the warp technology in Star Trek, where it's like they just delete your body in one place and then rebuild it from the similar molecules, like wherever you're being teleported, like that's just around. Like you're essentially being killed and then rebuilt with different materials in the exact same way. And I would say yes, if and only if there's a guarantee that it's an exact replication of me. Because if there's any alteration of myself, like no matter how minor, if there's any like alteration, then eventually I would be fundamentally changed and I would no longer like be the person that I am after going through the like after being revived essentially.
Yeah, I mean that's yeah. It's so difficult.
Because I think that in general people have like an attachment to their physical form as it is, and I don't want to like talk about the psychology of that because I don't know anything. Um, but it's like, for example, here's another scenario. So let's say your consciousness is backed up, like you're a biotic organism. Your consciousness is backed up, and your body is murdered. So they put you into another human body, but it's not the same human body that you already had. You're now in a different body, but you're the same person. How, like, that's something that I think most people would be opposed to.
Yeah, there was a movie with I think it was like Ben Kingsley and not Ben Stiller. It was like Ben Kingsley and Matt Damon or something, where they were talking about how rich people
Oh yeah,
would
would like upload their bodies into like androids
yes,
to
and then
live out different
they
lives.
would steal like other people's bodies. Like they would just pay like and so it was like I think they'd like pay homeless people or something. They would pay like they would agree to pay their families to use their bodies. And then they would just live extravagant lifestyles and just run those bodies into the ground and then get new ones.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah, no, I
I
know what movie
haven't
you're talking
seen
about. I
Get
don't remember
Out.
what it's called.
I haven't seen Get Out, but I think there
Neither have
is
I.
some
It's similar.
body absorbing in that too. So,
The I haven't seen it. I know that the basic idea is that there's this family that uses hypnosis to basically upload the consciousness of um this specific family into the bodies of the individuals that they essentially kidnap, um so that they can remain youthful. um I don't know exactly how the race plays out in it because it is a racial film in some sense. Um, but I do know that it's a similar situation to what we're talking about, where you're
yes.
like, but so like in that situation, you know, I'm sure that there's some interesting commentary that we could get on this topic from um trans people or trying to think like non-cis people.
Mhm.
Um, but like for me, I am comfortable in my body. I like what my physical form looks like is how I perceive myself. And so to take that and put that into another body that is fundamentally different and not the way that I perceive myself would alter who I am as a person, I think, in some way. And thus I think that in that situation where you can't upload it directly into your own body again, I don't think that we can give it the same sort of leeway of not being murder but property damage as if you can just upload yourself into a direct copy.
Yes, I think that's so. But what if, you get a vision shell? What if you have? What if we have a regeneration cradle, and we make synthetic humanoid bodies. Um, but for
Okay.
some reason they can't look like you. Well, let's say that they're like just like
Okay. So basically, we're just describing exos right now.
yes, yes. Basically
Okay.
exos. So you have to put yourself into a first of all, I would agree to that because I think that would be a great time. I'd love to be an exo. Uh,
Okay. So I know that we we said at the beginning that we weren't going to get into this. Um, but okay. So the thing about exos is that they have biological processes that their like robotic bodies are programmed to feel, like the desire to eat and drink. Because because essentially your brain in this robotic body is expecting certain biological responses of like decay and the stresses of living. And
mhm.
if the body doesn't provide that input to your brain, the brain rejects the body and you tear yourself apart to like because your brain would be able to process it, and so it try to like inflict um damage upon itself. Like you'd feel like you couldn't breathe. You'd feel like you're suffocating even if you weren't.
Mhm.
Um, so in order to combat that, they added in these additional like features to the robotic frames. But then also you have to have your brain reset every once in a while. Not like your memories wiped, but like you have to have your consciousness uploaded, taken out of the frame, and then reapplied so that your body doesn't realize that it's being tricked.
Yes.
Uh, I'm not saying that that would stop you because it probably wouldn't. Like they have the technology pretty well established in universe and Destiny, so like I think I would be okay with having it done at the end of the process. I would not want to be one of the test subjects.
Oh, I 100% agree. I also would not want to um I wouldn't want to do it now. I wouldn't want to become exofied now. At the
Yeah.
point where my body starts to decay, that's when I'd start thinking about it.
Hmm.
Um, because at that point, it's like I'd rather I'd rather still live out with my consciousness in a body that never will decay, and if that involves a little bit of like processing and like the whole I have to be reset every bit, like I'm fine with that.
So, all right, so you asked me a question I didn't really answer. So, like if we have the original question of like if we had the respawn system where your body like just gets rebuilt as it is, I think I would enroll in that program. Just because obviously I don't want to die. Um and that would be a guarantee that I wouldn't. It'd be interesting to see how that would affect my psychological being. I don't know. Like how that would I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about this more, maybe not. Cuz you got to think like part of your life and part of the way that you make decisions is based off of an idea that like there's a certain level of safety that you have to guarantee of yourself.
Yes.
And even if it's not like major things, but like once you remove any and all chance of you like actually dying, like if I know that, oh, it doesn't matter if I get shot right now because I'll just respawn, then you go into making riskier behavior. Um, so like if I'm crossing the street, I'm not going to be looking both ways because if I get hit by a car, oh well. Um, but that's assuming that that this is like a free process that just happens. It's not like you pay for every time your body's regenerated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I think
Which
actually is pretty probable.
it's an certainty. You have to
I
pay for it
yeah.
in universe, I think,
I
in
would not.
Borderlands.
Oh, that's actually a good point. Yeah, you do have to pay credits. I forgot about that. I would not do that. Um just because there's a lot of psychological research and literature, and not even psychological, but in some situations more philosophical uh, ideas that the reason that life is worth living or at all enjoyable is because
It's
of the
because
fact.
it's finite.
Exactly. And also, like, you get into the idea of the only reason that, like, some things are, like, cool or beautiful or impressive is just because of the sheer scale of them. And,
Mm-hmm.
once you shrink that scale, like, you stop being able to enjoy things. Um, and I would just, like, I mean, sure, I might do it once. Like, if they were like, hey, we've got, uh, if it was
We've
like,
got one Griffin clone,
yeah. If it was
one
like, hey,
time.
pay $200 to continue. Like, if you die and that screen comes up.
Yeah.
Like, I might do it
Round
for.
failed at 60. Round 63 failed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
200 monkey dollars to continue.
I might consider doing it, paying for it, like, once or twice as, like, insurance if I'm about
Mm-hmm.
to do something very dangerous.
Yeah.
Um,
But you wouldn't want to like be permanently subscribed to this.
yes. And I might
I
actually, I might do it once. I might pay for a one-time use of it to be like, hey, I get one close call with death where I actually die, and then I come back.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so honestly, I have to agree in a capacity with you on that because there's definitely something to be said about the temporary nature of life making it worth doing. Um, and also, curse of immortality is what we are kind of getting at here.
Yes.
This has been a wild episode. We've just kind of like we had a topic and we've just kind of gone wherever.
See, but it's still related to the topic.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so curse of immortality. Um, I think that like this is a system where if you first of all, this is not a system to. My assumption is that this is not a system that's going to like restore you to your prime state. Like it'll just restore you as you were the moment before you died. So like for example, if you're a 98-year-old like cancer patient and you're enrolled in this program and you die of cancer, then the thing's just going to bring you back like before you died and you're just going to have to continue that agony. So that's kind of fucked.
Yeah, I'd agree. There is
That's immortality but not eternal youth.
there is a
Which
there's
is
a
bad.
discussion of that in Palm Springs. I don't know if you've seen Palm Springs.
I have not.
It is a time loop Groundhog Day type situation. And in the movie, Andy Samberg's character has been in the time loop for like 5 years. And so
Mhm.
he's mastered everything about being in the time loop. And so he gets another person eventually enters the time loop and he is explaining to them because they're in a car and they're joyriding and they're going to crash and he undoes his seatbelt and places his head against the dashboard
Mhm.
because he wants to die quickly because the time loop resets if you die or if you go
Yeah.
to sleep. And so the problem is that if they don't die immediately,
Then they have to go through the agony of death.
then they have to go through the agony of death, or worse still, they might people might show up and try to save them, which
Mhm.
is some of the stuff that you have to do to keep people alive is like really horrifyingly painful. Like CPR, you break ribs during CPR. Like almost
Yeah.
like if you're doing it correctly, you will break ribs.
Yeah.
Which is not something that you want to do. But so like
Or experience.
I think that that's really interesting because if you get hit by a car and then like and if you don't die immediately, like would you get brought back in the state that you were like 5 seconds after the car accident?
Yeah.
Like, because that would be awful. And
Okay.
at that point, people would want to start carrying around like cyanide pills to make
The
sure that like, oh God, I'm gonna get into a long drawn out death situation. Time to just automatically chew this and get myself reset.
yeah. Okay. So here's I sorry, I stuttered. In Borderlands, they like you get respawned with full HP, which and you're getting shot most of the time. So my interpretation is they restore you to before you started taking damage. Um, so it's not like you've gotten shot once in the leg and then once in the head, and they only take out the bullet in your head. They don't take out the leg. Um,
But you
because that's what
retain
we're
all
basing
of
this.
your money. So I
Mhm.
think, um, I don't actually know in Borderlands, but I'm pretty sure the time frame of Borderlands is like 4 days. Like the entire
Yeah.
plot of Borderlands takes place over 4 days. So like
Hmm.
I think that it's more realistic that they allow you come in. Have you seen the show Upload?
No, but I know. I think I know what you're talking
It's
about.
the
Like the
show
character
Upload
content.
has an afterlife wherein if you're gonna die, they upload your consciousness into the cloud. Um, and so in the show there is a child, or not a child. It's sort of a juxtaposition because he's like 26 years old,
But the
but
last time that he was uploaded to the cloud was when he was 6.
was when he was 6 exactly. So he is in a child's body. So I think it's more likely that they have you come in, they scan, like they do a full body scan and upload process, and
Hmm.
then they use that. And so I think in Borderlands it's probably because you retain all your possessions,
Hmm.
which is again kind of weird. Um, I think that they probably have a whatever
Also, just video
eight
game
day
mechanics,
old.
though.
I mean, yeah, of course you're not
Hmm.
going to be able to explain everything, but I think they probably have a certain uh like for me it would be like, I went in at the beginning of the year and had a scan uploaded so that if I die, I go back to the state that my body was at the beginning of this year.
Hmm. Yeah, and if we talk about like resurrection in terms of like in D&D, like all of the resurrection spells, they don't work if you died of old age, and they restore your body as it like depending on what level you go to, of like I think the highest level, like true resurrection, like it'll restore any limbs or appendages um that you that you lost when you were dead, but it
Yes.
doesn't de-age you. So like even zealot barbarians that can be revived for free for all of time, as soon as they like get like as they age and get older, that the damage of aging doesn't get reversed, which is interesting. But it's sort of a similar thing that's what we're sort of getting at is like, do you want to enroll in this program if you're going to continue aging? If you're going to continue aging, and it's just like if you die of circumstance while you age, you have a backup. Um, I think that I would be fine with enrolling in that because it's not extending my life in terms of like how long I'm supposed to live. It's extending my life in terms of like I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. A drunk driver hit me. You know, I, it prevents those situations where it's like, he was gone too soon type deal.
Yeah, and again, you have to come up with, because of the old age clause, you have to come up with a contingency plan to where, like, if you don't want
You
to
can just
die,
unenroll.
yeah, you have to come up with a contingency plan for that. But also, in terms of true resurrection only resurrecting you if you die of anything except old age, true resurrection also creates bodies.
Yeah.
If you speak the name of the, if there's no body to be provided, so at that point, like, stick a time bomb in your chest.
Hmm.
and be like, okay, I'm about to die of some horrible, long-standing chronic disease. Um, or sorry, not that, because you could be brought back. I'm about to die of old age. I can feel it happening. Um, just blow yourself up. There's no body left. Uh, and then so they can bring you back with a new body. There's no real um text on this, but my interpretation of true resurrection would be that uh it would provide the body that it provides would be the state that the body was in before, like immediately before death.
Yeah.
But because there is wording on the soul, and there's a
Hmm.
lot of tomfuckery with how the afterlife works, like I could definitely see there being an option where it's like the soul appears in a new form that suits the desire of the soul.
Yeah.
So like that could be how you get yourself some eternal youth.
Yeah.
Um,
It's all very interesting.
yes. So I think we're wrapping up here. And
Oh
so
wait,
we should
I
probably
had one other
bridge.
question.
Oh yeah.
I have one other question. Cyborgs. So we've talked about like androids and humans and like backing up your body, and we touched on transhumanism where it's just like I'm going to become a machine. Um, but like we kind of just jumped straight into that. I think that there's an in between of like, would you make like a cyborg body? Like, would you replace organs and limbs and stuff? And I think the answer is obviously yes for the both of us. Um, but it's very interesting that there are some people that are like unwilling to part with their full biological mortal flesh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't understand those people. Um, cause it's wild. I mean, like I would all obviously want to. Deus Ex, mankind evolved is absolutely my type of stuff. Like I would love to have cybernetics, but um, I'm pretty sure it might be in that game or it might be in Detroit Become Human. Um, which is another fascinating game about the sort of status of androids. But anyway, I think in those games there are like you have to go get updates.
Hmm.
And if you don't, like your system is planned for obsolescence, so like your crap starts failing. Which is a terrifying thing to think about. Um, And I think that's probably the largest deterrent for people who don't want to make themselves. It's basically like installing an iPhone as your heart.
I mean,
It's just
yes,
like,
but
oh, if
also,
they you're entirely at the mercy of the people who produce those.
I mean, yes, I would agree that in that capacity. But I also like the concept of like you have to go in and like update your firmware or your software or anything like that. It just seems to me like that would be equivalent to like you need to go to the doctor to like
Healthcare.
yeah,
Yeah, so
like
there would be
there's
definitely some
parallels to
discussion of
things that
that.
we already exist, but I think that the main issue, the main drawback is that, like what are people in control of? And obviously like with like in the modern era we have the issue of like cybersecurity and hackers that could like hack your biotech. If you had like a robotic heart or something and a hacker like you have to update it or you have to make sure that it's working properly. That means there needs to be a connection to it, which means that somebody could hack your heart and just make it stop beating and then you just die,
Yep.
which is a terrifying thought. um but anyway, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for I'm just messing. um we
I,
do want to
I,
wrap up, but
yeah.
I think we should answer our actual question.
Uh Androids are not alive. And
I
you cannot murder them in the traditional sense, but you can do a parallel. You can tantamountly murder them. I believe it requires a different title and definition.
Wait, why are androids not alive?
Androids are not alive because they're it's a parallelism. They're not ever actually going to be alive. They may be conscious,
Yeah.
they may be sentient, but I think it's a false life and that they will never truly be alive.
Okay.
Uh,
But so,
that's my perspective. What's your
okay.
final definition on both of these?
I think that because there's a parallel between because I think there's a parallel between murder of an android and murder of a human, that you can in fact murder an android. You just have to do it differently than how you would murder a human. But I also think that androids have the potential to be alive in the sense that they have a okay. They have a personality that is like it is tangibly possible to destroy their consciousness and their character, and thus I think that that means that they have to have some sense of individuality that indicates that they're alive in a philosophical sense, not in a biological sense. Now, another thought that I just had is, I know we're trying to wrap up, but this is one thing that I think is important, is let's say we talked about like androids being backed up and booted into new frames and humans being backed up and booted into new bodies. What if you what about the situation where you back up an android's mind and put it in a human body? In that case, do they become a living being, or are they still just an android that is a false like facsimile of life?
Um, I think that I think it's still an android, honestly. It's just an android piloting a human body. I don't think that by putting an android's brain into a human, you get a living being. Because if I kill that human, you still have the brain of the android. So
Interesting.
it has not been killed.
Okay, so what if you uploaded like an android's mind into a human body and then deleted its save off of the cloud?
Um,
Because I think in that sense, it would then become a living body.
it would become, well, that's again, that goes back to um my thesis there, that the only reason that murder is a thing is because for humans, by stabbing someone, you have the intent to destroy their entire being. And so if that were to exist, if you had an android in a human body with no backup and no way to bring it back, it could be murdered because you can stab it with the intention to kill and destroy it forever, and it would work.
Cool.
All right.
And so the conclusion that we have now reached is androids aren't really alive. You can't murder them by conventional means. And if you were to assault or destroy their physical body, then you would be committing property damage rather than murder.
Now, what if the android brain in the human body was hooked up to a respawn system? No, that is a valueless question.
That is, yeah, that's
All right.
just ridiculous.
Um,
Anyway,
I always forget the outro.
we should write it down
We
sometime.
should. So if you want to give that, I think I have to go eat. Um, so if you can just give the outro, I'll save
Yeah,
this and then I can upload it when I get back.
that's fine. All right. That's all the time we have for real this time. Thank you for joining us and listening to the ramblings of these two madmen. And if you enjoyed this, please leave a comment and uh, listen to us, in the future. Let us know if there's any questions that you have that you want us to answer, or any comments in general. Um, yeah, that's it.
Excellent.